David, would you be able to really help us understand what is a stem cell and why stem cells are so important to us as human beings?
Sure thing. So first of all, there are many different types of stem cells. There are omnipotent and totipotent stem cells, pluripotent stem cells, multipotent stem cells. And these just represent different levels of cell differentiation. So we start off with these universal stem cells, and then they will begin to divide and differentiate. And so the gene expression in those stem cells changes. And the more that they divide and differentiate, they become different types of groups of cells. And then eventually they will become, let's say, a liver cell or a kidney cell or muscle cell or what have you. So all of us have these stem cells, and every cell in our bodies was once a stem cell. And this is where the power lays, because you can imagine, let's take a very extreme case where somebody loses a limb, right? This would be really tragic. But what if we could cultivate and grow these stem cells and then apply them to the injury site, and they could differentiate and divide in a controlled manner? We could regrow that person's lost limb. There would be no need for a robotic limb. So these technologies are kind of converging today, but eventually, what we're going to see is what you see in some science fiction movies where people completely regenerate lost limbs and lost body parts. And some of that is not science fiction anymore. Some of it is already being done today. And so it's definitely in our future.
Do we have like a set amount of stem cells in our body when we're born? And does our body make more stem cells? What happens to stem cells as we age? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Well, this is an interesting question because stem cells are subjected to the aging process just like every other cell in the body. And the number of stem cells is limited by what's called the Hayflick limit. So in other words, cells have telomeres, which are rods that are attached to chromosomes. And as cells divide, the telomeres shorten. And once the telomeres are gone, then you don't have any new cells. So this happens with stem cells. The quality of the stem cell degrades with age under normal, quote unquote, normal circumstances. And the number of stem cells that are available to us also declines with age until eventually we don't have any more stem cells. Now, what's interesting about this is that there are ways to circumvent that process, and that's some of the work that we do. So in other words, if you can find a way to lengthen the telomeres, which we have, and we've done it in a controlled fashion, you can make the cells younger, and you can also extend the number of times they divide, meaning that we can, with this tech, increase the number of total stem cells over a person's life, and those stem cells will be younger in the process. So that means we can extend lifespan, and we can extend how long people stay younger. The other, there's a number of other different approaches with stem cells, and one of them is what are known as Yamanaka factors, meaning that if you apply, Yamanaka was a researcher in Japan, and if you apply a Yamanaka factor, which is a signaling molecule, to the stem cells in the skin, you can revert them into pluripotent stem cells. And the reason I bring this up is because we see this with copper peptide, GHKCU. Copper peptide functions as a Yamanaka factor, and that means there are more stem cells available for healing tissue within the body. So in effect, why that's important is that if we're not making medical claims, but if people were suffering from, let's say, long-term chronic injuries, they can potentially heal those injuries by increasing the number of circulating stem cells. One other way to do it is by using a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, but that takes a long time. It's a lot of people don't like it, and it's relatively expensive. but it's a great technology.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what is a stem cell injection? Why would that be a technology that someone might lean into, kind of in relation to what you were just talking about?
Yeah, so there's some interesting things here. First, stem cell injections definitely are going to become more widely available, less expensive in the future. But right now, there really hasn't been a huge success in the conventional stem cell industry. There's some problems, meaning that you can't always control the way stem cells are going to divide. So one of the methods, for example, would be you can cultivate stem cells from a person's own body, and this is a little bit less risky, and then re-inject them. But if you have somebody, let's say over the age of 50 or 60, the quality of those stem cells has declined and they're not as good as repairing tissues. So a little bit of pro and con there. But in any case, problem is when you can't completely control the way a stem cell divides, that's when accidents happen. So there have been experiences that people have where the stem cell differentiates into different tissue. This has happened in animal experiments where early on in Japan, they were doing research into Parkinson's disease. They would inject stem cells into the brains of monkeys, and the monkeys would die because the stem cells divided in an uncontrollable fashion. So when they would open up the monkey, they'd find in the brain hair cells, muscle cells, liver cells. So this is one of the risks and dangers. Another problem is that if you're not managing inflammation, the stem cell colonies die off very quickly. So let's say the reason why a person wants to get a stem cell injection is to treat a chronic injury. Let's say they have torn rotator cuff in their shoulder. Well, the inflammatory chemicals, such as the inflammatory cytokines, the stem cells are attracted to that inflammation, but the inflammation also kills off the stem cells. So this is why some people go for stem cell injections and they don't get any result. And it's because of the inflammation. So with our tech, copper peptide and also the Eon patch are wonderful at managing inflammation. And this is why people get results with our products when a stem cell injection failed.
Would you maybe be able to explain a little bit about what is phototherapy, because that's the basis for our patches, and then how have you harnessed the technology or the concept with phototherapy into the technology that's now available through LifeWave?
Yeah, so the patches are a form of phototherapy, as you say, and they stimulate the skin with very low levels of light. So there is a very well documented interaction between the human body and light. There's well over 5,000 published clinical studies on using light to influence the metabolic processes within cells and within the human body. So, for example, one of the things that can be done with light is to turn on mitochondrial function. And this is an area that I look into because mitochondrial function is directly connected with how we age, either in a good way or not so good way. So a common example that we would use is you go out in the sun and you might notice I have a little bit of color. And there's an X39 story, by the way, there that we can circle back on. But it's a good example how you go out in the sun and sunlight will elevate vitamin D, or sunlight will elevate melanin, giving us a tan. Melanin is actually a very powerful antioxidant, and it protects the skin from damage from UV radiation. For men that are interested in elevating their testosterone, you go out and you subject your androgen receptors and your trapezius muscles up on your shoulders to UV light, and it elevates testosterone. So non-drug method for elevating testosterone. So so it's very well documented that light will cause biochemical changes within the human body. What we do with the patches is I discovered a way that we could process completely organic materials so that they, when activated by body heat, they reflect very low levels of light that stimulate the skin. This will in turn cause a biochemical change in the cell, which we document with blood tests and with urine tests and bioelectrical tests. So in the case of X39, we stimulate the skin with low levels of light, and it causes the cells to produce more copper peptide.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about that copper peptide, what the biochemical response that's created with X39 as well as X49 and how it relates to stem cell activation like we were talking about before?
So X39 would be the mother product. So if there are people that are on today that are looking at LifeWave and they're wondering, well, where do I start? Start with X39 because that has the broadest effects of any of the patches. And the reason for this is that X39 elevates a peptide called GHKCU, or copper peptide. And GHKCU was discovered by a biochemist back more than 50 years ago now, Dr. Laurent Picard. And he should get a Nobel Prize for this discovery because it's truly extraordinary. And what he found is that copper peptide is a very powerful signaling molecule and gene modulator. And there's many studies that are on the internet that people can read about this. But essentially what this means is that as we age, our library of information, our genes, they change in how they're expressed in the body. And this is important because if we're shifting our genes from a younger state to an older state, we're going to end up with wrinkles and gray hair and loss of muscle tissue and declining immune function and all the rest. If we can reset those genes to a younger, healthier state, then we can recover some of our youth. And that's exactly what copper peptide does. It resets about 1/3 of the human genome to a more youthful state. So the impact of this, what does that do in practical terms? Well, we found we could take people over the age of 60 and restore their cognitive function. So we can improve speed of processing, short-term, long-term memory. We can regain muscle tissue and recovery with X39 and X49, improve energy metabolism in the cell, manage inflammation, and of course, increase collagen production for reducing the appearance of lines and wrinkles, and among many other benefits.
Do you mind sharing a little bit in the disclaimer standpoint what these patches do and don't do?
Sure. Well, first thing is I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an inventor. We don't give medical device advice. We don't make any medical claims. We don't claim that our products are going to treat or cure anything. They're general wellness products. So basically, the claims that we make is that they're going to improve overall energy, help with management of pain, help with sports performance, and of course, some other things that have to do with lifestyle. So in terms of disclaimers, we're not making any claims that these patches treat or cure any illness. They're wellness products.
Can you share with us a little bit about why you might want to use these two patches together in our performance bundle option?
Yeah, the reason is that the patches are related in the sense that they're both copper peptides. So X39 elevates GHKCU, which is a glycine-based peptide. And there's some very interesting information, by the way, about elevating glycine metabolism and extending lifespan. And then X49 elevates AHKCU, which is an alanine-based peptide. So alanine has a narrower metabolic window than does GHK. And so you find alanine and alanine peptides in the muscle tissue, the heart tissue, the brain, and as we're finding out in the bone, and also in the skin. And so what this means is that X39 produces these very broad effects throughout the entire body because you find glycine just about everywhere in the body. And X49 is going to be a little bit narrower, but those effects are very, very powerful. So what we saw with X39 is that it can help support recovery after exercise. But what we found with X49 is that people were building muscle and losing body fat without any type of diet, and of course, engaging in exercise. And that was some of the first information that came out about it. We also, of course, found out with X49, one of the areas where it was different is that it was turning on osteogenesis and preventing bone loss. So that was really exciting. And then going back to my tanning story, my heritage is European. And my father is German, and my mom is of Italian and Irish descent. And I got the Irish part of me in the skin, which is when I would go out in the sun my entire life, I go right to a sunburn. And I've had some very traumatic experiences with that. Well, we've been doing some investigation because copper is used to manufacture a Faraday cage, and a Faraday cage blocks electromagnetism. And so I began to think about, is there a way we could use these peptides or create patches that elevate copper-based peptides that could interlink and form a type of Faraday cage in the skin? And there was some compelling information to show that copper peptide, GHK, could reduce the effects of radiation on the body. Anyway, long story short, we did find in a study that's the case, and this may lead to us being able to claim that the combination of these patches reduces a person's exposure to Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and 5G. We have some preliminary data on that. But my own experience with this has been, I've been able to go out in the sun, and I've experimented without sunscreen, and I go right to a suntan, which I love. And many of our members have had a similar experience. I would encourage anybody, though, to use sunscreen. But we found this out back in 2018 when we were launching X39. And in fact, we gave out X39 and the Olivine night cream on our 15-year anniversary cruise. And it's been delightful that this potentially could be a skincare product in a number of years for helping people to avoid getting sunburn. I've had very severe cases of sunburn when I was a teenager. And the other thing that I would say with that, if someone chose to experiment with that, make sure you're taking a copper supplement and you have enough adequate copper in the diet. And I would also attribute part of the effect to that. So I make sure that I'm either consuming enough liver or chocolate or taking a copper supplement. And that's a really important part.
Yeah, you can take, what is it called? Desiccated liver pills to get some of that?
Yes. So liver is the best source of copper that I'm aware of. It's extraordinarily high in copper. And the downside to having liver is that it's very high in iron. It's a little bit more risky for men than it would be for women. And I'm going to talk about this actually at convention, so I won't get into it now. But I think there's some compelling reasons that you should be taking a liver supplement if you're concerned about COVID. If you want to recover from COVID faster or actually help to reduce the symptoms of COVID, you want to take liver. And I'm going to explain why at convention. Don't want to talk about it right this second. But what's interesting is that high iron levels cause oxidative stress and free radicals in the body. But GHKCU can neutralize ferritin and expression of and production of free radicals. So it balances that out. So anyway, for a lot of reasons, liver supplements are very, very good, especially I know that you're really into weightlifting. There are some other compounds in liver that you can't find in other protein sources that definitely contribute to muscle building. You know, it was an old time secret of the bodybuilders from the 1950s through the 70s. And in the 80s, the bodybuilders said, well, it's just another form of protein, but they were wrong. There's some magic in liver where there's growth factors that help to build muscle. And the bodybuilders of the 50s, 60s, and 70s knew this. And people like Jack LaLanne, not that he was really a bodybuilder, but a health enthusiast, you know, he was doing incredible things at age 70. And he attributed a lot of that to taking liver. And I think a lot of that has to do with the copper content, among some other things.
Mind just kind of going through some of the basics, like how long to wear the patches. If you're wearing X39 and X49 together, where do you put it? Best time of day to wear it, and things like that.
Sure. Well, a lot of this is covered in the instructions. When we test the patches in our clinical studies, people are wearing them during the day. On a technical basis, there's probably not a reason why someone couldn't wear it in the evening, but for the moment, because of the clinicals, we recommend that people wear the patches during the day. Where you apply them in the studies, we apply them behind the neck, below the belly button. Just about anywhere on the body is okay. Some people, when they have an injury, let's say they have, you know, a cut or broken bone or something like that, and they want to support the healing process, they want to put the patch at the location of the injury. There's no reason why you can't do that, but we found in our blood studies that the effect is systemic. So just about anywhere that you put it, it's going to have an effect on the entire body. In combining patches, X39 behind the neck, X49 below the belly button is just fine. It's going to work for the entire body. Again, if someone had an injury and they want to help reduce pain, I'd recommend adding Eon and then putting Eon at the point of pain. We found as a practical matter that works extremely well. Patches should be worn 12 hours. Reason for this, that you don't want to wear it more than that, is that the patches trap body heat to activate them. So if you wear them longer, they could irritate the skin. And then also there's a phenomena in phototherapy called attenuation, meaning if you wear them too long, your body can stop responding. So don't wear them continuously 24 hours a day. Your body will stop responding. So 12 hours on, 12 hours off.
I fell and tore my rotator cuff, and I can raise my arm, but it's not as strong as it used to be. Should I use both X39 and 49, and should I put them on the back of my neck or near the shoulder, or is there anything special?
Yes. Great question. There's a number of things that you can do. So first thing, I want to get into it in a little bit more detail. So just as a general recommendation, what's worked for other people is to place X39 behind the neck and then Eon on the shoulder at the point of pain. Or if you have a point of discomfort, that would be a good way to start. Another thing that you can do is to apply the LifeWave patches on the bottom of the feet where it shows in the instructions for use. That's also going to help with pain and range of motion. You may find that it's not necessary, but that's something in addition that you could do.
If I use 2 sets of energy patches, will you burn additional calories from fat?
Interesting. There is a point of diminishing returns, and a lot of this does depend on a person's diet, how much sleep they get, exercise, and some other things. But diet is by far the most important compensating factor. So let's say you have someone that is practicing intermittent fasting. When we start to consume food, the body right away is going to produce insulin, and then the insulin is going to store additional calories as body fat. The patches can compensate for this, but what this means is that if someone is consuming food all day, it's a little bit of an uphill battle, as opposed to if someone is on, a ketogenic diet or they're doing intermittent fasting, then you can really optimize the effect. But I would say that 2 patches, we've studied single set of patches in terms of burning calories. We used indirect calorimetry, and we found that people could burn an additional 300 to 600 calories per day. So there's quite a bit of variance. We haven't done that study with 2 sets of patches for calorie burning. We have seen it in practice with LifeWave and with other studies where you get an increase in energy flow through the body. So, but I would say that 1 set of patches gets you about 70, 80% there. So you're not going to double your results with 2 sets of patches. You might get another, 10, 20% improvement. That'd be my take on it.
I have a question on blood pressure. I have someone who got onto the X39, X49, and for 4 months was responding wonderfully. Blood pressure went down, skin and everything improved, sleep improved, and then suddenly everything started going backwards, and the blood pressure is now up again. And nothing has changed. The diet is the same, medications are the same. He's actually on less medications. And I'm just wondering why that would happen with the blood pressure.
Yeah, that's really difficult to say because the studies that we've done on both X39 and X49 have continued to show statistically significant improvements in blood pressure. They're minor, but they trend down for sure. So it's difficult to say what's going on there because we just don't really have the data. The other thing, that I'd say is we don't make a claim about reducing blood pressure. So I wouldn't want someone to think that you could use the patches to reduce blood pressure. It's obviously a very serious medical condition. If I was going to look at it from a diagnostic perspective, one of the first things that I would look at is levels of potassium and magnesium. Magnesium, of course, is involved in over 400 different metabolic processes, and you can reduce blood pressure over a period of time with magnesium. So this is to say if a person had additional stress in their life, they were getting on an airplane more often, maybe they had COVID, their magnesium levels could drop, and this could cause an increase in blood pressure. I'm not saying that's the case here, but that's just one example of something that could change, that could cause an increase in blood pressure. We just don't have any study data that's available that could indicate that the patches would elevate blood pressure after a few months.
I have a doctor who's looking into LifeWave, and he's asked if we have any articles from Lancet or JAMA to support LifeWave's clinical studies.
We do not. Because those are medical journals and we don't make any medical claims. We have to walk a very fine line here because in the United States, as an example, we are regulated as a general wellness product. And as a result, we don't make any type of medical claims. Otherwise, we might be classified as a drug in class 3 or in class 2. If we were going to pursue that route, then of course we would do clinical studies to show that the patches have an effect on treating a disease, and then we would publish in one of those journals. But because they're wellness products, that's why we don't seek to publish in something like JAMA.
My question is, if I have X39 on back of the neck, GV14 for 12 hours, and then I put Eon in the same spot, in the evening, will attenuation happen?
Well, I would not stimulate the same spot because you're going to irritate the skin. This would be, the same thing as wearing the same patch at that spot. So wearing 2 different patches at the same spot is not really the issue. It's the fact that you're wearing any patches at the same spot. It's going to irritate the skin. So I wouldn't recommend that. From the perspective of attenuation, the wavelengths of light that are coming off of X39 and Eon are different. So there would not be attenuation in that regard. So that's actually something that I do. I wear X39 during the day and I wear Eon at night because I find that it will relax the nervous system, doesn't go into parasympathetic mode. It goes into a balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic. So it provides a very nice, relaxing, deep sleep. But I would not place the patches at the same point. You're going to end up in a relatively short period of time, irritating the skin and making it red.
Does X39 activate stem cells or regenerate stem cells, or both?
So we would be looking at the effects of GHKCU on the body. So what we've done in our clinical studies is to show that the patch elevates copper peptide about 30 to 40% within the first 24 hours. So that's pretty dramatic. And when you consider really the only other way to do that is by getting an injection, and that would be quite expensive. And not many people want to give them injections every day, right? So then when we look at the effects of copper peptide, what exactly is it doing? One of the things that copper peptide does is that it mobilizes the stem cells. So it gets stem cells to go to injury site, begin the healing process. We also know that copper peptide will increase the number of circulating stem cells by reverting the stem cells in the skin over to pluripotent stem cells. So, and you can see this as a practical matter in some of the testimonials we receive where people are healing very, very quickly. They heal as if, they were younger. And this is because there's an increase in the quality of the stem cells. The stem cells act like younger cells and there's more stem cells. So I think that answers the question.
I have a question, of course, which is a little specific and more related to the studies and the hope of stem cells. But would you think of, or did you think, David, in your studies, that a semi-broken spine marrow could eventually heal if it's not completely broken? We know that it's immediately or very fast making a crust and it cannot resolder together. But say that only half of it is broken. Do you think that from the healthy parts, the non-broken part, it could push the crust away and regrow the marrow?
That's a really interesting question. If I were going to tackle that problem, I'd be using more than patches. Patches would be used in a supporting nature. One of the questions is going to be to what extent is there scar tissue? The patches would help in the sense that Eon and X39 help to manage keloid proteins, which form from inflammation and can form scar tissue. So that would be a huge benefit. But to reduce the scar tissue would require a couple of other techniques. So, for example, ozone therapy could potentially reduce the scar tissue. Another thing that could help would be magnetic field therapy. And there's a number of different techniques there. So we don't have quite the time to get into that. I might also, with an injury that concerning, I would probably also look at upregulating the number of circulating stem cells with a hyperbaric chamber. There was a technique that was developed in Israel. You can easily find that on the internet. And this clinic got a lot of notoriety because they found that they could lengthen the telomeres with the use of a specific process and procedure in a hyperbaric chamber. But the important thing here is that hyperbaric chambers, if used properly, can increase the number of circulating stem cells in the body by 4, 5, 6 times over baseline. And that's pretty significant because very serious injuries in the body, like brain trauma, can now be healed with that technique. Of course, diet is also going to be important, making sure people get enough protein and healthy fats to support the recovery process. But I would be using things like ozone therapy, IV ozone, to deal with the scar tissue. I'd be using magnetic field therapy, hyperbaric oxygen, maybe some IVs of some different things like vitamin C IVs, which are known to upregulate collagen production, and then a number of the different patches, which can help support that.
Please explain why it is said to only use 2 of the YH, meaning Eon, glutathione, or carnosine products at a time. And if we use all 3, is it hindering something?
No, this is always based on studies. And actually, we do have a study that was done by 2 medical doctors in Australia. It's in the science section of the website, and this was done looking at the quality of the skin. And what they found was that when glutathione, carnosine, and Eon were all used together, it produced a very dramatic improvement in the quality of the skin. And this is really easy to understand because glutathione, of course, functions as an antioxidant. Carnosine is a very powerful anti-glycation nutrient, meaning that unfortunately here in the United States, people eat too many carbohydrates, the blood sugar levels go up, and this can cause damage to healthy tissue. So carnosine can actually inhibit this glycation process, the damage to healthy cells caused by elevated blood sugar levels. And then, of course, Eon is managing stress and inflammation. So, yes, it is possible to wear all 3. We definitely have more information on combining any 2 of the patches, but we do have one study which indicates you can use all 3.